Good morning, and thank you for joining us at our 26th Asbestos Disease Society of Australia Ecumenical Memorial Service. I'm Melita Markey, daughter of Robert and Rosemary Vajakovic, founders of the Asbestos Disease Society of Australia. This is our most important calendar event of the year. We are live streaming the service on Facebook, so please share this service with family and friends when you get home. It can be viewed anytime using our Facebook link. Today we ensure those thousands of Western Australian lives lost to deadly asbestos fibres and indeed Australia's worst industrial disaster, Whitnum, are not relegated to the past but remain a part of us and act as a warning of the dangers when society's systems of governments fail us. They also remind us of the importance of unions, occupational health and safety, and the need to ensure that profit does not come before human lives. To make an omelette, you need to crack a few eggs, as suggested by Lang Hancock, speaking to a business journalist, will never again be accepted as the rule of thumb for occupational health and safety. We must remain vigilant, while on average 1 life in Australia is lost to mesothelioma cancer every 12 hours. We are proud that you could join the ADSA staff and committee here in this beautiful church and online via Facebook to reflect on all the friendships we have made during the year and the time we have spent with our beautiful members and their families. Their photos are scrolling on the screen to my left. We hope they are here with us today and relieved that in this 1 hour a year we keep the wrongfulness of their deaths in the public sphere and create an opportunity to prevent other families from suffering such pain and loss. We must also take the time to acknowledge the selflessness of so many sufferers participating in medical research treatment trials. While we hope some may have benefited from these, we also know that many have paved the way for treatments today led by the dedicated medical teams, world-leading at the National Centre for Asbestos-Related Diseases and the Institute of Respiratory Health at Sir Charles Gairdner Hospital right here in Perth. This year's address explores the concept of memorial and how it can serve asbestos disease sufferers, their traumatised families and society as a whole. In last year's address, I spoke about my personal journey starting as a 12-year-old when my parents opened our home to those whom no fault of their own had contracted entirely preventable but deadly asbestos diseases. They had been rejected by their employers and social security and many cruelly judged as malingerers. Asbestos diseases were difficult to diagnose, which just added to the suffering. Medical treatment 40 years ago was limited, and wonderful doctors, including Professor Bill Musk, who we only lost last week, were being inspired to find the best treatments and to fight to prevent more incidents of these deadly diseases developing in workers and the community. In the early days, the ADSA could not offer much more than the hand of friendship to sufferers when they dropped over for a chat, maybe a cup of tea, or when my dad could, a glass of Slivovitz. I watched visibly strong people rapidly wither in a few months and sometimes weeks from the ferocious cancer mesothelioma. The financial strain on these people and their families was horrendous. They were frightened of the companies and suffered immeasurable stress in what our trusted GP, Dr. Greg DeLaw, here with us today, and I are in no doubt about that in today's terms could only be described as PTSD. Many people unable to reach us died alone and in poverty. Their families were left to fend for themselves. One of the families we met was the Belitho family. Lenice Belitho, one of 7 kids, described to me her idyllic lifestyle in Whitnum as a child. Her dad worked for Lang Hancock in management, and they had a nice home outside of town in what was described as the settlement on Joffrey Creek. It was where the hierarchy lived. They lived next door to Lang Hancock and his family, and Lenice played with Gina. That was until Lenice's father contracted mesothelioma. and was expected to work for Hancock until 2 weeks before he died, without compensation or support for his widow and 7 kids. Life then became very tough for Lanice's mother and her siblings. Mrs. Eileen Belotho supported her family with 3 jobs until the kids could support themselves. This trauma affected the kids well into their adult life. It is still raw for Lanice and her family, who are joining us online today. We send you our love, Lanice. This idyllic setting that Lanice described to me has also attracted many visitors to Whitnum, in the form of tourists, travellers, not just from WA or Australia, but from around the world. The region is vast and stunning, but instead of being covered in red dust, as the Pilbara is renowned for, it is piled high with deadly blue asbestos fibre and dust. Travel statistics tell us that over 40,000 people visited Whitnum and its surrounding gorges in 1993 alone. The CSR Whitnum mining and milling operation closed in 1966, and no doubt it was hoped that the passing of time would wipe this disaster from the living memory of Australians. You would think they may have succeeded when you have reputable publications like the RAC travel website in 2021 listing Whitnum as one of the top 8 ghost towns to visit in Australia. Adventure tourists, limited to WA by COVID, have been flocking to the free camping in Whitnum Gorge with children and pets in tow. Sadly, Ghost Town is a somewhat accurate description to the ADSA, as we are in no doubt the town is truly full of the souls of victims of what today would be described as the scene of industrial manslaughter. The artist Jan Sandberg's imagined in his painting, The Blue Angel of Whitnum, an Aboriginal spirit, the Wandjina, painted blue like the dust, looking down over the contaminated lands of their people. In 2018, Lanice Belotho approached the ADSA about setting up a lasting memorial for the people of Whitnum. The town is contaminated and they could not visit to try and make sense of what destroyed their families. So Lanice had started a Facebook group called Lost Whitnum for the members to share stories and memories and generally support each other. When I looked into the possibility of a permanent memorial, my father Robert told me go for it, but the best he'd managed in 30 years of lobbying was a $1,000 donation from a member for a flagpole to lower in respect of our former members and friends. At his suggestion, I turned to our good friends at the CFMEU and Unions WA, here today, to assist us with this challenge, and was delighted when they offered us a place for remembrance plaque for the victims of asbestos diseases in Solidarity Park, opposite Parliament House. However, it was pointed out to me by various members of the Whitnum cohort that Solidarity Park is for all workers, for all industries and workplaces. While they were extremely grateful for this acknowledgement, the people of Whitnum felt they needed a spiritual and symbolic place to reflect, grieve, to remind Australia of its worst industrial disaster and what can happen when corporate greed and indifference to life is unlegislated. The people affected by the Whitnum tragedy and the traditional owners of the land are a unique cohort in that they have lost multiple family members, not just to asbestos diseases, but to trauma. So many of the victims were just innocent children, homemakers, traditional owners, tourists, geologists, just bystanders, not miners. Many feel betrayed and have had to watch their families and traditions crumble. They have had to suffer the indifference to their trauma, loss and lack of acknowledgement through what can be described as a red wash. Perpetrators and regulators ignoring the piles of blue asbestos fibre stacked in the Whitnum gorges, flooding into Joffrey Creek and on into the Fortescue River, blowing across the town and surrounding region for the last 80 plus years, hoping that the red dust of the Pilbara would eventually cover the blue fibre. However, they forgot the geology of the mineral that attracted them to Whitnum in the first place. Asbestos is indestructible. A permanent, standalone memorial to the Whitnum tragedy would enable our West Australian community to honour those lost and serve as an everlasting tribute to those who have passed. We note, almost 60 years on, in 2021, legislation passed in WA so perpetrators of industrial manslaughter in the future can now be prosecuted. Now, once you all agree there needs to be a memorial, and I hope you all do, you need a suitable design. So I went to the literature on memorial design, and what stood out was the concept of a memorial site. And I quote from the academic Brett, who said in 2007, "Public memorials are preserved for the future by carrying the past into the present in order to remind people and help them to remember and prevent changing historical facts and events. Thus, public memorials serve for both transferring information to all visitors, particularly the younger generation, and for giving tourists the opportunity to establish empathy with past events which the society they are visiting lived through. Moreover, these memorials help tourists to carry this frame of mind back to their own countries and cities and inspire them to establish a bond with similar crimes and problems today, whether faced in different societies or in different contexts." The ADSA believes that the lack of a Whitnam memorial site will lead to the next Whitnam cohort of asbestos diseases, death and family tragedy. The younger generation, attracted to the beauty of the region and unaware of the history of industrial manslaughter, death and total contamination, are visiting regularly. Our rough stats monitoring social media tell us at least 60 people visited Whitnam in the last week. So today, we pray for our politicians to listen and to provide a lasting and fitting memory site for Australia's worst industrial disaster, Whitnam. While it will be of great comfort for many to see their loved ones acknowledged and memorialised, it will be tinged in tragedy for us all, as we know the dying is not over. We know that we will have to leave space on the very large plaque of our lost loved ones' names for those who are not diagnosed and yet to be diagnosed, and will likely be exposed to deadly asbestos fibre this Christmas holidays. So perhaps the Whitnam Memorial Site is the solution the government is looking for to adopt jointly with the Whitnam Closure Bill, to ensure we can keep people out of Whitnam until one day the great Wandjina spirit can make it pure again. Thank you. Would you all please stand?